Welcome to the Recover Out Revolution.
Started Watertown Safe Haven. This is Tiara. I really suck at this talking stuff, so I'm going to do this quick and hand it over to Ned. We're just going to briefly update you on the things we're working on, the progress we've made since our last meeting, and what we hope to get done by the next meeting. The biggest thing since launching this, it was the beginning of February that we started it. It was after my sister wrote a Dear Heroin letter that really hit home. She struggled with it for a couple of years, but it was hard for me to understand. And with this letter, it kind of put things in perspective. So I had an idea that I wanted to do something. I wanted to help Watertown. I wanted to be able to raise my kids here and not have to worry as much as we currently are. So I reached out to Tiara. I threw some ideas at her, and this is what we've come up with so far. A lot of people have reached out to us since then. Like, if I could show you the overwhelming amount of emails and Facebook posts and messages and text messages and everything like that that come pouring in from people just saying, thank you, this is what Watertown needs, how can I help, what can I do? There's people that have gone to high school here that don't live here anymore that are reaching out and wanting to make donations or trying to show their support even from far away. So we've formed close relationships with a lot of the people. We have Watertown Police Department, Rogers Memorial, Watertown Hospital. We have a bunch of local drug and substance abuse counselors on board, Dodge and Jefferson County Human Services, and that list is growing. There's a lot of local groups that are stepping up that we were completely unaware of before that are like, how can we be a part of this? How can we help? How can we work together to make this bigger and impact more people? So even though that you guys only see a little bit on our Facebook page, a little bit on our website, there is a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes right now. What we want to be able to do, create awareness. We want to be able to provide one resource guide for everybody who needs help. We came across this one from Washington County, but it's just a guide that has all the local resources plus informational tips and everything like that. We want this to be available for Dodge and Jefferson counties, in our police departments, in City Hall, wherever people can get it. One guide for everything that they need. The support and encouragement, that's a huge thing too that we want to be able to work on. We don't want anybody to feel alone. We don't want the families to feel alone or overwhelmed. Assisting in job searches for those in recovery. Educate, that's a huge thing I'm working on right now. I'm trying to get into the high school before the end of the school year to be able to get these kids something before summer. We have the Stairway to Heroin event coming up, but that's after school hours, and I feel like something would be more beneficial during school hours. And we are also working with the school board on assemblies each quarter for starting next year. Verifying insurance, that's a huge part of getting treatment and the first step to getting help of what your insurance is going to cover and where you can go. Informing loved ones, we want to be able to help you tell your spouse, your family, your parents, anybody. Sometimes that's the hardest step, is admitting it. Assist in safe detoxing, that's where Rogers and Watertown Hospital are coming into play. Transportation, getting people to their appointments, to treatment, to their PO, to job interviews, anything like that. Inspiring other communities. We've already had a lot of people reach out, like Lake Mills asked us to step out that direction and help them. We have some people from Oconomowoc asking us to help them. We teamed up with another group from Dodge.
Hello, everybody. Excuse the weirdness of this. I do a podcast called Recovery Revolution every Wednesday, and I thought that this would be a great opportunity to, instead of doing that, where I normally just kind of like talk about some sort of random topic that's recovery related, that I would incorporate this event with the podcast. So I really appreciate that you're letting me do that, and I really appreciate being here. It's usually me that's called upon to inspire everybody, and what you just explained, what your goals are, what you're hoping to do for this community, is not only brilliant, but like really awe-inspiring. So I want to really for taking that initiative and trying to make all of this happen, and creating this atmosphere of recovery, because that's really what's needed. So I'm going to back up a little bit and introduce myself. My name is Pat Kepfer. I am a person in long-term recovery. That is an interesting identification for some people. In some circles, I would say that, wow, this is this is becoming embarrassing. All right, what we're gonna do is be ingenuity. Okay, there we go. Ingenuity. Okay. In some instances, in some circles, I would say that my name is Pat and I'm an addict. Introduced to recovery, it was in a treatment basement, and it was a 12-step oriented fellowship, and that's how you do that there. You say your name and you identify as an addict, and that offers inclusion and solidarity, and it's also a way of being sort of anonymous, in the term anonymity meaning like faceless, one among many, and thereby also being humble. But when somebody says, my name is so-and-so and I'm an addict, we all have an idea of what an addict is. We all have a relationship with one person or another, or have had relationships with people that were addicted to various things in various ways, and usually a lot of destruction is associated with that, a lot of negativity. So when somebody says, my name is so-and-so and I'm an addict, that's the end of that conversation. It just stops there. It's like, okay, I know who and what you are. Let me make sure that my wallet is safe and that you don't have the keys to my house, because the last time somebody had the keys to my house that was an addict, things didn't go so well. So when I say my name is Pat and I'm a person in long-term recovery, I believe that opens the door to another conversation, to more questions. Somebody might say, recovery from what? And what do you mean by long term? What does that mean? Are we counting the days behind you? Or it's not about how much time is behind me so much as it is about what is in front of me. I have my whole life now. And that's something that didn't exist conceptually or in a real way for me before June 7th, 2009. I didn't have a future. it wasn't like I had dug my feet in the sand and made a place for myself in the world and then lost it all because of drugs. I never really gave myself the benefit of the doubt. So I never organized or gave myself like a foundation to stand on. I never lost anything because I never gained anything to begin with. Everything that I have now is a result of my recovery. So, I am from Madison, Wisconsin. I'm prone to saying that I'm the most Madison person you'll ever meet. And what I mean by that is that I have, in all my years growing up there, never lived in any one spot for more than 2 years. Sometimes I would look at, like, you know, the backs of milk cartons and think, oh God, am I going to see my face? Do they find me in a mall or what? But that's just going to keep happening. My parents divorced when I was 2. My dad died just before I turned 5. And my mother's already well-established drinking problem did not get any better after that happened. We moved a lot because people who deal with substance use disorders often go for geographical escapes, thinking that, well, maybe if we start all over on this side of town, maybe things will work out a little bit better. Maybe a new school is the answer, a new job. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily true, but that's just sort of the way it was for me growing up. So I experienced a lot of different neighborhoods throughout Madison and met a lot of people there. The thing about having a mom or any family member who is chemically dependent is that it creates not only an environment that is teaching people poor coping mechanisms. What comes with that is hereditary kind of fallout. You know, the numbers are certainly in that addiction is a disease and that it affects millions of people in ways that can be measured scientifically. She's in recovery now. She's been sober for 16 years, which is phenomenal, but that's her story. And I'm very proud of her, and it's only because of recovery that she and I have a relationship today. But, you know, her passing that along to me, along with, you know, showing me that when life gets hard, when things get painful, the way to deal with that is to pick up a drink or a drug. That was what I learned. That's what I saw. And that was my experience. Because it was generally she and I growing up, there wasn't a lot of time to really teach me how to be, you know, responsible, how to be humble, how to be all the things that, you know, a growing young man needs to be. So I kind of had to make a lot of it up as I went along. And, you know, I made friends with people that I thought could teach me stuff. A lot of my friends growing up were a lot older than me. I had a lot of girlfriends because I, you know, sought comfort from them in the ways that, again, you know, my mom and other family members left vacancies for, and are widely available. It just sort of goes with that territory. I began to sort of carve out an identity as a 90s pothead, you know, like I listened to Grateful Dead and, you know, had long hair and, you know, I had a hoodie with a big pot leaf on the back of it, you know, things like that. And it was fun, you know, it was like a good time. I was reckless and had no responsibilities, and yet still very much aware of the fact that everything I did to cover up how much I was hurting as a person. Now, I can't exactly like quantify you know, all the reasons why you know, my life has been a painful mess. I mean, I could, you know, on a chalkboard I could list a couple of things, but you know, they end up sounding like excuses, and I don't like to feel sorry for myself, but in every life, you know, there comes pain, there comes confusion, there comes discontent, and the bottom line is like, so happened to be the most convenient way to ignore reality. And I think that's what's happening in so many communities now, is that people are just hurting for one reason or another, and they're looking for a way to deal with the fact that they just can't accept that. So I talked about geographical changes within my hometown. Well, I took that to a whole other level at about 21. I started leaving the state, and on a whim, I traveled to New Orleans, Louisiana, and I was living with some friends at the time. I'd recently been released from Oak Hill Correctional Institution for an alternative to revocation. I was on probation for burglary, where I tried to steal a case of beer so that I could be the hero of the Friday night, you know, and show up to back to the party with a case of beer because we were all out of booze. And ended up, you know, as a felon because of that, which I, you know, still dealing with. But I was on probation and was not complying, obviously, and was sent to rehab so much as a drug school. It was more of a cognitive kind of program that they had there. I got out of there and then was living with some friends, and they all did heroin, and one of them had lived in New Orleans for some time, and she would always say like, "Hey Pat, let's go to New Orleans," and I'd be like, "No, you got a job, you got a kid, I got a job, whatever." And then one day I didn't have that job anymore, and her mom had the kid for like the weekend, and she's like, "Hey Pat, you want to go to New Orleans?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go." So we went, and I almost stayed there, and then coming back, we had this long argument, like hundreds of miles long argument, where she almost left me in the middle of Kentucky because I was upsetting her so much. Because she was addicted to heroin for a number of years, and she would often talk about how devastating it was and how painful the withdrawal was and how it just kind of sucked the life right out of her. And I was like, well, just stop. Just don't do it anymore. What's the big deal? You know, if it's so bad, then just don't do it. And she's like, you don't understand, Pat. It's not that simple. You can't just stop. And I was like, yeah, whatever. You're weak. You don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, no, Pat, you don't know what you're talking about. And for some reason, that sunk into my head that I really kind of didn't. I didn't really have a lot of ground to stand on. So in my brilliance, I decided that I was going to try it. What it was that was so great about this drug that my friends were literally falling all over themselves to maintain it. And she was a needle user, and I was like, well, let's just go for broke, because, you know, why not? I mean, why mess around? I mean, that's how they do it in hospitals, right? So let's mainline that. And she set up a shot for me, and she gave me such a little amount that I didn't feel anything. And I was like, well, that was kind of dumb. And I remember thinking in that moment, looking out the door of the bedroom to the kitchen where there was a bottle of whiskey or rum or something on the kitchen counter. And I was thinking, I'll just go make a drink and just enjoy my night that way. And she said, do you want me to make you another one? And I thought about that for a second. And that second still like lingers on in the recesses of my memory. Like it's almost like it's still happening. You know, it's one of those pivotal moments in your life where you're like, wow, I could have gone this way or that way, and I went the wrong fucking way. I was like, okay, why not? And when she gave me that second shot, I said these words. Oh, so this is what it feels like. And in that moment, ever in my life, I discovered a sense of comfort, a feeling of safety that I had never known before. It was as if all of my problems didn't exist. I felt so good that literally nothing mattered. And that's what it is, you know, that's the pull of that drug, is that it just makes everything okay, even when things are clearly not okay. And everybody else in the world around you can see that no, things are not okay. You feel just fine. And until you felt that, it's hard to conceptualize it, but the important thing to understand as a person who has been there is that it's synthetic, you know? It's not real. It's not, it's like falling in love with a robot, you know? I mean, there's no real person there. You know, like the people that we love them because they have substance and character, not just because they're pretty, you know? So imagine the person that you love the most, but without all the character, you know? Ironically, that's kind of what we end up with when people use drugs in this way. So there I was, and you know, even then I wasn't great. I really like it, but I still kept doing other things in my life. And then a few months after that, I received a large inheritance. My grandmother had died the year before, and her estate had closed out. And suddenly, just one day, without warning, I received a check for $37,500. I mean, what better to give somebody who just started using heroin? So I started partying quite a bit. Partying quite a bit more, and then decided to take a trip out to Las Vegas with some friends. And as it went, they drove, I flew, I met up with them, and then while we were driving from Vegas to Dallas, we got pulled over because we were all stoned out of our minds, and police saw us at the convenience store and knew that we were stoned out of our minds, and we're like, okay, we gotta stop these guys. Something bad's gonna happen. And the driver of the car was 17 years old. He had at one point been called in as a runaway and was still on like a national register for that. And even though he had reconciled with his mother or whatever. So he was detained, and nobody else in the car had a license, so we had to walk away from it, just with what we could carry. And me and two other friends walked down the road, and then we decided to sort of break off, me with one guy and then another guy and his dog. We all hitchhiked to Dallas. And I kind of fell in love with, I was, you know, I mean, we would drink, smoke weed, and whatever we could do when we got to places, you know. But it wasn't like I, you know, had a stash of dope on me. And in fact, when I left Madison that time, I kind of decided that, like, you know what? I wanted to try it. I learned what I needed to learn, and I'm fine. I'm good. I'm done. And I was basically just gonna walk away from it and not make a big thing out of it. Well, I ended up that summer hitchhiking all the way up into Sturgis, South Dakota for the motorcycle rally. And there I met a guy named Brandon Nichols, who was one of those guys that you meet. He's kind of like Chris Farley, you know, just like really sort of like wild and obnoxious, and you either really, really love him or you hate him. And I really loved him. This guy was great, you know. And when I met him, he's like, oh, hey, man, you know, where are you from? And I told him I was from Madison, Wisconsin. He's like, oh, hey, man, I got a buddy that was just there, him and his girl, and they got this dog and this bus, and they're driving around the country, and they're great people. And what he did not know is that those people he was talking about, the guy and the dog, along with 4 other people, had died in a rollover accident in that bus. The wife of the man was driving it. She was stoned and tired, got into an accident and rolled the bus, and everybody, including the dog, died except for the girl who was driving. He didn't know that. So I had to deliver that news. And from that moment, you know, it sort of strengthened our already like kind of kindred spiritual bond that we already liked each other. But then this came out and it was like, wow, man, like, you know, we had this very kind of empathic, emotional moment. And I was like, okay, we're gonna be best friends now, you know? And I was there for like a month. And a few weeks later, I had stated that I wanted to drive back to Madison, you know, see my mom. And he had shown interest in driving me. So he was like, yeah, man, we can do that. And I got family in Wisconsin, and we can stop and see them. It'd be great. And then at the last minute, I decided that I didn't want to drive into Wisconsin with him with his piece of shit car, because I knew that we would get pulled over, and I had a warrant here for trespassing. And I knew that if we got pulled over anywhere near Wisconsin, I would go to jail, be extradited, all that fun stuff. So I told him that I didn't want to do that. And he was disappointed, and I remember seeing the look on his face and the disappointment of that. And but he took it well, and he was like, all right, man, that's cool, you know, so what are you gonna do? And I'm like, well, I'm just gonna fly back. And he's like, okay, I'll take you to the airport. And we were gonna go the next day. He was gonna drive me to the airport. That night we partied at the house we were at, and had a good time. Next morning I woke up on the living room floor, like on my face, really hungover, and walked up the street. And so he's like, no, he's dead. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, last night he left the house and I guess was driving back to his mom's to drop off some stuff that he had in his car, and hit another car and then rolled over and died. And I was devastated. I did not handle that well. I took full ownership and responsibility for that situation. I felt like it was my fault. Because, you know, if I hadn't changed my mind, if I had this, that, all the other things. And no amount of Budweiser in that town could help me cope with how I was feeling. But I knew of something that could. I had something in my back pocket, something that I knew. It was like I knew a secret. I have the key, man, you know? I know exactly how to deal with the situation. I just need some heroin. That will totally take care of how I feel. That will take all of my bad feelings away. And I could not wait to get back to Madison. And I committed myself basically to a hardcore heroin habit. I was dedicated to it. I was like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to sink right in. And I did. And I knew at that point that I was getting another check for like $30,000. And that, and my plan was to basically kill myself before that money ran out. Well, that didn't happen. 8 weeks after I got that check for 30 grand, I had a $300 a day habit, and I was still alive and just as miserable. And then I became homeless. And for like the next several years, would just dip in and out of Madison. I would take off, travel the country. I would leave again. Between the years 2004 and 2005, I went from one ocean to the other. And it was like, and I've said this before, but it was like I was the hood ornament on the front of the runaway freight train. You know, while I had the front row seat, I had absolutely no control over what was happening. And I was just waiting for this inevitable crash. It's like I couldn't die fast enough. But I never had it in me to just simply end, you know. Well, in 2008, I returned once again from Wyoming this time, and I was 29 years old. And it was sort of occurring to me that, you know, I was no longer a kid on a, you know, on an adventure. I was, just go to YouTube and type in my name, Patrick Kempfer. I could direct you from there. So I came back and, you know, reconciled with my mom and my ex-girlfriend, and some old friends. One of them was my friend Mike, who was kind of like a little brother to me. I met him in like 7th grade, and we were very close over the years. When I was in a foster home, he got to come and live there. I worked that out so that I could, you know, keep an eye on him, I guess.
Which one?
Go to YouTube. Okay. Just scroll down. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. A little more. Instagram's go to next. My Road to Hell and Back. Felt like a pretty appropriate title. You might want to turn the volume down a little bit. With me, I got him started with it, and he had been in jail for 8 months. He was on parole from an event where he had nodded off at the wheel and crashed into a woman on University Avenue in Madison. And she didn't die or anything, but she got pretty banged up, and he was cited for reckless driving and driving while intoxicated. Went to prison, got out, and was on parole, and then, you know, he kept using drugs, obviously. because he had friends like me who were supporting that behavior. And he had been in jail for about, like I said, about 8 months and working. So he had earned some money in that time. And we made this plan to hang out. He, myself, and another friend of ours, Jason, who, we were all kind of like in cahoots back, from a long time ago. Usual suspects, as you might say. And we made this plan to hang out, and he was conscious, but his lips were kind of like blue, and he was vomiting a lot. Well, another friend of ours showed up and had some Suboxone, and he prepared a shot for him that would that he could inject in himself that has some properties that are similar to naloxone that could have reversed some of the effects. I argued the point that it would just make him sicker, so he didn't do it. And then at one point, our other friend left. And it was just me and Mike there for a while. Then I said I was going to go walk my dog. And I said I'd be right back. I did not come right back. I was gone for probably close to an hour. And when I returned, I ran upstairs and discovered Mike sitting that I love this guy. He was like my brother. So I called 911, and they came and they got his heart started. But unfortunately, his brain was dead. So after 3 days, they took him off of life support, and he was gone. And for the next 6 months, I drank every day, and I used with a fierceness that I had never known before, like punishing myself really, really hard. It wasn't just like, oh, I don't want to just not feel pain. It's like, it's almost like I want to feel as much as I can. And then on June 6th, 2009, after surviving my 13th overdose that day, I suddenly decided I didn't want to live anymore. I was like, this is not, I can't convince myself any longer that this is sustainable. And my plan was to just kill myself. And in that moment of just perfect desperation, the Madison police walked up to me on State Street, and they recognized me from the emergency room a few days prior. And they're like, "Sense?" And he said, "Have you ever thought about stopping?" I said, "Sure, I've considered it." He started talking to me about this program that he was leading called DART, which is now part of WIRCO, which today celebrated its 20th year in Wisconsin. I was at that convention earlier. And he must have seen my eyes light up, because he literally said, "Well, hold on. There's a process. There's an interview, and you have to qualify for this program." And I looked down at my broken body, and I thought, I think I qualified. And in that moment, once again, I remember feeling something that I had never felt before. This time, I felt hope. I felt like I might still have a shot. Like there's still a chance that I could live a life in this world. And he was like, "Oh, hold on." So, of course, I qualified. And I went to treatment at Hope Haven in Madison. And it was there that I was introduced to this thing called recovery. I was I was introduced to people that were living examples of people that had once used drugs for the same reasons I did, and now didn't, and were totally content with that. That blew my mind. I was like, how is that even a thing? How are you doing it? I mean, it's like watching somebody doing a magic trick. You know, you're like, how are you doing that? How are you doing that? You know? But it's not magic. It's very simple. And what it comes down to, the thing that has allowed me to become an advocate in recovery, the volunteer coordinator of Recovery Support Center, a board member of a nonprofit organization, an executive committee member of a county coalition, you know, and a speaker on the topic of addiction and recovery and hope. And if I might say, a pretty good writer. The thing that has allowed that to happen is the same thing that is consistent and apparent in every successful recovery story. And people find it in Alcoholics Anonymous, people find it in Narcotics Anonymous, people find it in church groups, people find it in work groups, people find it in school, people find it in family, people find it in friends, people find it in marriage, people find it with pets, people can find it anywhere. And what it is I'll illustrate it like this, and this is what I will close with. Decades ago, some very brilliant people that are much smarter than I am, you might want to stop that. Just hit cancel, or yeah, that'll work. Otherwise, you're gonna hear me start singing Dead and Bloated. Would not be apropos. Okay. Decades ago, some very brilliant people thought, well, let's get a better understanding of addiction and what that is. So they took a rat and they put it in a cage and they gave it some drugs and some food. And the rat used the drugs more than the food, and the rat used the drugs until it died. And that became sort of the consensus. I was like, okay, once an addict starts using drugs, they will use it until they die. And that's just how it went. That was the public understanding. Well, some years later, some other brilliant scientists thought, well, okay, that's good, but let's try that again, but let's change it a little bit. Let's do something a little bit different. Drugs, as far as it was concerned, was all it had. Just like every addict, as far as they're concerned, when they're locked in their addiction, that's all they have. When community is introduced in that pivotal moment, I mean, it can't just happen all the time. I mean, you can't just show any addict at any time, oh, here's community, now go get better. It has to happen in that perfect moment, when they've come to the point where they realize that the drugs aren't going to work anymore. But when that happens, if we can create a large enough net, if we can have enough programs like this, and people like you who are interested, this is my patience working well. There's a better shot that we can reach those people in that time, and we can present to them this community that exists, that will support them, and that will show them that recovery is not only attainable, but sustainable. And the thing by far that has allowed me to become the man that I am today is that people gave me something that I was never capable of giving myself. They gave me the benefit of the doubt. They believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And that's what I have now to offer anybody that is where I was, is that belief, that hope, that they too can work themselves out of that and create a life for themselves that they can be proud of. I'm very happy that my friend Ben could be here with me today. He is a very articulate and kind gentleman, and very well versed in recovery himself. And he's given me an opportunity to believe in him, and he has for a long time believed in me as well. And that's kind of how that works. My cousin Rachel is here, and she has also given me a lot of faith, and she's believed in me as long as she has known me. And likewise, I see her as quite the warrior, putting up the good fight. So I just want to say thank you all for being here and listening to me, and for caring enough.
Events geared more towards adults. We'll stay away from the kids.
I only used the F-bomb once.
You did. No, you did good.
I'm interested in your, you mentioned you're active in some social justice issues, and you write. Say a little bit about what that is.
I'm the opinion editor for the Madison College Clarion. It's the publication of the MATC. And I just sort of fell into that, actually. I started a recovery club at Madison College, and I just wanted somebody there to write about it. So I went to the staff meeting, and and they were talking about like different stuff, and they're like, oh hey, there's this new video game, they're remaking Resident Evil. And I was like, really? They're remaking the video game. They're remaking the video game Resident Evil? And I was like, oh God, nothing's new anymore. And the editor-in-chief was like, hey, do you want to write about that? And I was like, sure. If you'll write about my thing. She's like, yeah, sure. So they gave me that opportunity, and then they gave me another opportunity. And then Tony Robinson was killed. And I took a great interest in that, because we had kind of a similar upbringing. I mean, obviously, he was half black, and other than that, I mean, we had a pretty similar upbringing. And in fact, I had also had an experience where I was tripping at that exact house where he was killed, and I was not shot dead by the police when I was discovered, but he was. So I took a great interest in that and started writing about that, and became very prolific in that action, Black Lives Matter. And then also I've actually received an award a couple months ago in Minnesota for the Best in the Midwest collegiate. It's like a collegiate press award for an article I wrote concerning the community's response to the sexual assault that happened on the bike path in Madison last year. The rally that happened after the fact was really remarkable, and I wrote about that. So I got an award for the editorial piece. So, and I'm looking at getting a paid internship over the summer with the Progressive, hopefully. Stopped in there today. I didn't meet the man I wanted to meet, unfortunately, but I met some of the people, so making connections. So yeah. I also have a blog that I write on, and in the paper at Madison College, I have a regular column called Recovery Corner that deals with only recovery issues. So in fact, part of the thing that you used, that was sort of like a quote of mine, was from an article from my column. I'm becoming less interested in the degree and more interested in the journalism certificate. The degree isn't really going to do anything for me, whereas just simply the know-how of putting a paper together and shoe leather reporting, as they say, going out and getting the story is really much more important to me. So if I don't get the degree, I'll just have a buttload of student loan debt. Either way, I mean, it doesn't matter, you know. But my intentions in terms of career are to continue on with the Wisconsin Recovery Community Organization Recovery Support Center, carving out funding for that, and really making that like the staple of my career, and then, you know, also writing, because I'm just really sort of like an expressionist, I guess, more than anything. I just, you know, I mean, if somebody wants to pay me to write articles, that'd be great, you know, but really, my work is in recovery advocacy, and more than anything, I want to make that my job, my career, you know, like full time. So yeah. Anybody else?
How often are you speaking at events like this right now?
I don't know. It sort of, I don't know. It comes and goes. So it's like when it rains, it pours.
The vice president of Stop Heroin Now.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a few people that said you did an amazing job, and we're lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for being here, and hopefully we can use you again in the future.
Hope so.
So we need to work on getting people in to our meetings. If
Yeah.
there's any ideas or suggestions you guys have there. Our first meeting, we had a really good turnout, and I was impressed. I think people are still a little afraid, a little intimidated, not sure what to expect, and that's gonna
Right.
take some time. Trying to make the meetings a little more fun, but it's kind of a tough issue to do, so we will be incorporating the projects like the handprints and stuff like that that
Yeah.
are a little more upbeat instead of the depressing talks or the tough subjects that we need to talk about though in order to help the other people. And if you guys have ideas or anything that you think we can do or focus on more, let me know. Like, I'm running in circles, I have a lot of things like up in the air that I'm working on. So it's just me focusing on one thing at a time and getting those implemented before moving on to the next.
Is there a certain age group that you're trying to reach out to? I mean,
For meetings like this, I mean, I'd rather focus on the adults. We will be working on assemblies and programs and speakers for the younger kids. But, I mean, a lot of parents have asked, can I bring my children to these meetings? And I would say absolutely. I mean, some things might be over their head, but some things will register with them as well. And to me, it's obviously a personal opinion, but to me, I feel like the more educated they are, the more they're hearing about it constantly, the better it's going to be for them.
Mhm. Yeah, earlier today, she asked if somebody could bring a 10-year-old to this, and I said, well, you know, I mean, I'm dealing with some pretty graphic content, you know, like when I describe, like, you know, discovering my friend's dead body, you know, that could be kind of upsetting. I mean, I think that more so than, you know, cursing is gonna, you know, could have an adverse effect on a young one. But then again, it could be hearing something like that deters them later in life. So, you know, I mean, I what did I say? Parental discretion is advised. So, yeah.
Hey Pat, maybe you could share your first piece, your gutter punk piece, to the page.
Oh, sure.
I think that the individuals that didn't make it here would be able to, I mean, that's a pretty good summary of what you already spoke about tonight, and I thought, I don't know, it's one of my favorite pieces of yours, this one.
Yeah. Yeah, what is it, from?
From gutter punk to journalist.
Yeah, gutter punk to journalist or something like that, yeah. Yeah, I can do that.
Sounds good. And I did forget another thing that we are working on, have a bark, but we gotta wait on confirmation for that. But we do wanna have a few guest speakers there, and then that's when we're gonna do the balloon release.
Cool.
Did you have something, Karen?
Yeah, what I was going to say is that working with them in a forum or a situation like this would actually be beneficial to them, you know. They know a lot more than what we think they know, and they hide a lot more
Oh, yeah.
than we think they hide.
I mean, if you think back to how much shit you didn't tell your parents,
Exactly.
you can only imagine now.
I think the more important thing is they think they know more than they do.
Yes.
They think they have it all figured out, and, you know,
Well, they have a lot of information and we have a lot of information, like, what's lacking is communication. You know, everybody's got information, but without the communication, the information can be very dangerous. Yeah.
And that is something I've been working on too. There's a select few from the high school that I know, and my niece is one of them, that like, I was nervous to bring it up to her because I'm like, well, maybe she's clueless, and then here I am putting these ideas in her head. But getting their feedback too of what they know, what they don't know. Something I found out today too was that the private schools, they don't have a DARE program. So they have nothing on drug education throughout their whole academics until they go to high school, which obviously is just a terrible way to go for that. So that's something I want to work on, but holding them outside of school for those parents that are still interested.
Okay.
it's nice to see you're a symbol of hope.
Thank you. Do what I can.
And that's an intense story too. It's not just like like that's a lot of years and a lot of time and
Yeah.
a lot of tragedies to deal with before you decided to get better. They say that recovery, how many times does it usually take? Like 3 or 4? Is what,
Yeah.
that's what Rogers told me. I don't
Right.
know, but they said, I mean, it
No,
usually doesn't
there's
happen
a-
on the first time.
Yeah, there's definitely an average. I think I'm not trying to say that I'm unique because that's kind of dangerous territory, but in some instances, my story is sort of not like a lot of other people's. Like, I didn't go to a lot of treatments. I didn't try over and over to get it together. It was just like, I just never tried. And then when it became apparent to me that I could, it was just like, well, yeah, let's do that. Let's something better, sure, I'd love to, and here we are.